through just testimony, as well as people having dramatic changes in their mobility and going back to the doctor and seeing changes in their.
Hello, and welcome to the Pacific Channel, where you learn how to be, do, and have whatever you want through the power of the law of attraction, meditation, and more. I'm your host, Steve Doherty. In this audio clip, Dr. Emil and Dr. Joe Dispenza talk about all of the latest testing that they are doing while people are in the Dr. Joe week-long workshops. Now they are collecting all sorts of data on people who attend the week-long workshops. They're getting very sophisticated and are constantly improving the way they run their tests. For example, they are now able to closely monitor all participants, those doing the healing and those getting healed. So, for example, if a person starts to suddenly go into heart and brain coherence with the real-time data that they are collecting, they will actually be able to tell who of the healers is causing the healing of that one person. Dr. Emil will also talk about how they have tested water by keeping some of it in the healing meditation room, and then they examined it under a microscope. I think Dr. Emil meant to say that the water experiment was based on Dr. Emoto's work. Dr. Emoto, if you don't already know, was in the movie What the Bleep Do We Know, along with Dr. Joe. Dr. Emoto's work was about how water responds to its environment, to the energy that surrounds it, and even to our thoughts. So he experimented with blessing some test water and placing labels on the water of positive thoughts. And he placed negative thoughts on other water. The result was that the water receiving good thoughts looked very symmetrical and beautiful in its structure, but the water that received negative thoughts looked disorganized and ugly. I got very interested in this, and I sent Dr. Emoto an email to ask him about the testing in more detail. To my surprise, he answered me. My question was about if he had done any double-blind testing with the water, because one of my skeptical brothers asked me if he had. He said that he had not, but that he was planning to. Not many years later, in 2014, Dr. Emoto passed away. But it's great to see that Dr. Emil and Dr. Joe are continuing to test water, because we are all somewhere around 50 to 70% water. We are like walking water bottles, as Dr. Emil will say. These guys are really smart, and they are doing a fantastic job of collecting the right data to get to the bottom of healing. Let's listen to them now.
It's a lot, right? I mean, this is quantum, right? You got to look at everything and all potentials. The other, for good measure, we threw in urine collections as well. We made sure the hotel was not serving asparagus around the time of urine collection. But we have so much information from each individual that we're going to be able to track, that if you start connecting all the dots, it's going to be a nice web that we create of really what's happening to that individual as they go through this week-long experience, and what's happening when that individual becomes a community. One of the things that was sort of a hidden part of the quantum study that you and I talked about, and others in the research group know, but I don't think it was quite aware in the whole group, is that during the healings, all three healings, we know where every one of the quantum participants was. And so why is this important? Now we can start looking at their biometric data, because we've got a tag on them, right? And they signed each of the cages. And so we'll be able to see if some transformational things we see in some of the Healies track with who's healing them. And then can we see changes in their heart rate variability that track with that coupling? And so we really want to start looking at the dynamics of what happens in that room. And when I sit back and watch these healings, I'm amazed at what happens in these various cages. I mean, it's just hospital bed after hospital bed, right? It's a 250 hospital bed facility you recreate every day for that last 3 days. And some of these rooms are shaking, where people are physically shaking and creating some sort of energy movement. Others are peaceful still, yet something is happening in all of these. And we started getting at some of the biology and the physics of what's happening in that room.
Yeah, and just to add to that, it also really important is the biometric data. What we're looking for in the people that are administering the healing, we're looking to see the degree of synchronization that's taking place in their heart rate variability measurements and correlate to see if that has any effect on the person who is actually being healed. In other words, what about the person who's down there receiving the healing? If 6 out of the 7 people, or 5 out of the 6 people, or 3 out of the 5 people are actually in heart coherence, and the person that's receiving the healing moves into heart coherence at the same time, and that person has some type of change in their health, not only subjectively, like I feel better, or that felt amazing, but wow, we can look at their blood analysis, we can look at their cheeks, we can look at their urine, we can look at a whole bunch of things and say, wow, there's a direct correlation between the cause and the effect. That's very, very important data for us. At the same time, did we do a couple quantitative EEG studies too with the cage?
We did. We started this pilot called the cage study. We're going to do more of this in 2023. And so in those, I mean, it was, if you can imagine a device on a person, it was on those 7-8 people that we did. So it was a Healy that had an EEG device, a Polar strap, a Garmin, and then the heart guard. So they've got 4 things on that we're measuring, right? Heart connectivity, biometrics, as well as brain activity. And it was this, and their healers had these on as well. So all devices on one cage, followed for 3 days. And so we'll be able to see how those individuals synchronized during the healings, and if it was different during the first, second, or third healing, or if there was a flow where it was less loose the first day and it got tighter and tighter and tighter during that third healing.
Or look to see if there's a progression up from the Healy who's doing the meditations on a regular basis.
Yeah.
What type of changes that's actually taking place over time as well that leads to or helps us understand what are the criteria
right
that actually influences the person to become healed. So this is pretty exciting stuff because once again, there's no physical intervention, there's no exogenous substance that's being used and in some measure, in some way, through just testimony, as well as people having dramatic changes in their mobility and going back to the doctor and seeing changes in their values. We're trying to just tell a better story, and then of course we studied tears. So why don't you talk a little bit about that as well?
Yeah. Now, sort of 3 things that come to mind as we're thinking about this. So as I was walking around that room, I'm like, we need to get some electromagnetic field sensors around this room and see if there's this vortex or wave that's created, if it propagates in one area. And of course, I'm on my Google looking up EMF sensors, and they exist, right? So we're going to do that eventually, get a couple hundred of them up in the room and see what's happening. 2 things that we've sort of played around with over the last year that we're playing around with now in Quantum 2.0. We did that water experiment, right, in Denver about a year ago, and we put water in the back of the room, in the front of the room, and looked to see if it changed. And this is the Japanese guy Morrow and sort of his ideas that we've sort of we're trying to perpetuate. We saw differences. The water sitting in the back of my lab, we just haven't been able to touch it because we have so many other things going on. So this was one of the reasons why I decided so late in planning to collect urine from everyone. I mean, we're a big water bottle, right? And so we're going to get some elements of that in urine. We're going to start looking at the structure and see if there's changes in electromagnetic patterns and shifts that we can see, along with exosomes and other things that are in urine. But we did this really cool study, which I haven't figured out yet because it wasn't perfect, and no experiment first time is. We're starting to look at senses and what happens. So if we are truly a human water bottle, could we put one of these humans in a room and deprive them completely of their senses so they can't see what the room is like, they can't hear what's going on, and they're basically being influenced by energy in the room? So we started this. It's the senses study. And so we had one individual in the room, was not participating in the event. He would come in during, I think he came in, we did a pre-measurement on him, And he came in during 3 measurements during meditations. And he had my noise canceling headphones on, so he had muffled sort of noise that he was listening to. He had white noise on in his ear, so he was not getting all of that information, right? And then the first day he came in, he didn't even know what the room looked like because he had blindfolds on before he came inside. The stuff he described is impossible for someone to describe unless they've gone through a week-long event where they know the knowledge and they know what their brain can do. He described this experience where during one of the meditations, and it scared the crap out of him, is his brain was detached from his body. He saw this vision of his mind moving around the room as the meditation was going on, and himself being stuck in the chair, and he could see all this happening, and he didn't know how to get back into his body. These are things that experienced meditators describe when they're having these mystical experiences. And here's this guy who's never meditated, has learned none of the science, sitting in a room of 1,800 plus people, absorbing that energy and feeling the same thing that a lot of them are feeling. It's astonishing to me that we have this connection, this ability to manipulate sort of that environment that we're in.
Let's just tease that out for a second here, because I don't want to miss this for the group. We typically get information from this 3D experience by gathering it through our senses. We see something and hear something. And when we see something and hear something, that's information that activates circuits in the brain or reconstructs neural connections in the brain. So the footprint of the person's interaction with the environment assembles neural architecture, so that, and the more you do it, the more you remember from the experience. And so the majority of information that we receive is through the environment. That's our body is interacting with the environment through our senses. Now, we're disconnecting him from the environment. We're blindfolding him. We're putting noise canceling headsets on to block the information sound-wise that's coming from the room. He's not eating. He's not tasting. He's not smelling. He's not feeling anybody or feeling anything with his body. And yet him just sitting there, somehow, because the body's primarily made up of water and the nervous system really is just this huge circuit board of connections that's suspended in water, and the nervous system, actually no nerve actually touches each other, which is kind of crazy. They're floating in the space between each connection has water and there's nothing there. Somehow, by just being in the presence of a community that is in some way collectively experiencing something, the information that he's receiving into his nervous system is transcendent of his senses, and yet he's having similar experiences as if he was actually following the instructions that everybody else is following, and yet he's having a very similar experience. It's once again it's mind-blowing for us to even hypothetically consider it. But then when you see the effects that are related, it's astounding. So somebody who knows nothing about my work, or what we do, doesn't have any interest in it, and yet he's just sitting there and having these really profound moments, speaks volumes about how the collective in 7 days moves through experiences and how everybody contributes to the whole.
So Dr. Emil talked about how they had 250 hospital beds and how people were responding differently to the healing. Some were experiencing physical sensations and some were not, but the result seemed to be the same anyway. This is all amazing when you think about it. Could you imagine if new hospitals trained all of their doctors on how to get into brain and heart coherence in order to heal people, instead of using drugs that usually don't work anyway? And that other experiment of taking someone off the street to see what their experience would be was amazing too. This guy had no idea who Dr. Joe was, what the work was all about, or anything, and yet he ends up having an experience as if he was one of the meditators. He said that it was as if his brain left his body and he was worried that he wouldn't be able to find it again. This is very similar to what lots of people experience when they meditate. You get a sort of detached feeling where you may not feel like you have any arms or legs, or it feels like you are swooning and detached from your body. The trick is to allow that feeling to occur and not to freak out, get upset or excited about it, because otherwise you'll snap right back into your body with all of its normal emotions. Some say that they can leave their body, fly around their neighborhood, and come back at the end of a meditation. But the point to this part of the discussion is that the energy in the field that you are in can have a drastic influence on how you feel, and perhaps can influence a person to heal from a significant ailment. From a scientific viewpoint, this is profound because it's proving that Dr. Joe's work works, that we can influence others through our own vibration, that healing groups are powerful, and that we are all connected. Again, the illusion is of separation. If you like this video, please hit the like button. And if you know of anyone who could use a little encouragement to never give up in overcoming a physical ailment, please share this with them. And if you are suffering from anything in any way, know that you can heal yourself of anything. It's time that the world wake up to the true power that all of us have to heal ourselves and one another of anything. Imagine a world free of dis-ease, because whatever you imagine can come true. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.